Filmmaking is such a collaborative art form, and you've worked with Makanda in the past. How does that prior relationship with a writer director influence what projects you want to be a part of? What was it about this script and character that resonated with you?
Well, first of all, I actually just finished a third project with Makunda 2 or 3 weeks ago. We wrapped. He's just a special individual, such a soulful, spiritual guy. He was a monk at one point for 7 years in India. He's an author as well as a writer director, and so he and I have a lot in common outside of the industry in terms of what our interests are and the conversations that we have.
Mm.
Um, but I knew what I was getting into in that regard because I enjoyed, my the work that I did with him prior to this. Um, but to me, this was for as an actor, it was such an easy sell, the pitch, because it's a simple concept, survival story. Plane goes down in the desert. You're on a big game, a reserve for big game in Africa, and nobody knows you're there. I mean, that's terrifying. And it's one of those things that you can immediately kind of put yourself in that place and say, what would I do? You could, like, what if Kevin landed
Yeah.
in this situation? It's like one of those very not relatable because no one's really been through this, but it's easy to kind of connect to in that regard. And so that grabbed me. Um, I wanted to work with Emil. He and I have mutual friends, had met socially, but I've always enjoyed his work, and Lords of Dogtown, um, or maybe it was a different name. I don't know. And the movie he did with Sean Penn, I really enjoyed those, and I wanted to work with him. And then also thematically, there's this spiritual thread
Hmm.
throughout the film, about questioning why do bad things happen to good people, that sort of thing, and what are God's motives, and is God, looking out for us? Is where is the fairness of things? Uh, Ideas about sacrifice, is very much a big thing for Emil's character from in regards to where he starts at the beginning of the movie and where he
Yeah.
finishes. So there were some poetic aspects to that appealed to me, and there's a point in the movie when my character is just numb after all he's seen and experienced
Hmm.
and sits down under a tree and just sort of says, I'm not moving, and whatever happens, happens. Just surrenders. And I don't know, I think dramatically I responded to that.
Not only are you starring in it, you're also an executive producer, and you've done that a bunch of times in the past as well. How's that work behind the scenes, whether you're producing, writing, or directing, impacted the way that you now approach your work on screen as an actor and vice versa, and interpret scripts and characters like this?
Well, each situation is different. I mean, on Shooter, the series I did, the action series I did, I was a producer on that, and I was so, so heavily involved, choreographing fight scenes and,
Mm.
doing rewrites and involved in the casting and everything. It's always different, but I think that, even now this series I'm starting for Amazon up here in Toronto, I'm technically not a producer on, but that's how I'll function on set because of how long I've been in this industry. Um, I respect people's time and money, so I'm never late. I'm always
Mm.
prepared. I ADs love me. The AD is who runs the set. They always love me because you don't ever have to look for me. My interest is in efficiency, getting the
Mm.
thing done as close to right as you possibly can. And that comes in very handy on these small ones, man, because
Yeah.
the margin of error is very slim. We had such a short window of time to shoot this and very little money and none of the creature comforts or, things that people might come to expect on a movie set. I don't even think we had like snacks, dude. Like water was hard to come by. We never went to our trailer. We were out there in the dirt. The trailers were too far away because you needed to be able to shoot 360 degrees without seeing anything. So you don't even have the time it would take to be driven back to your trailer. That cuts into your shooting day. So we were really out there in the elements, dirty, in folding chairs. It was very unglamorous. But I have an appreciation for that too. I like to work hard. I don't come from fancy folk. I'm
Mm.
a guy who likes to get down and dirty. Yeah, but it's every situation is so different, man. I've been doing this for over 30 years and 50 some odd productions, and not a single one is like the other.
And I feel like that lack of resources really lends itself to the state where your characters are. You know, Andrew's wife becomes such a source of strength for him. Who are the people in your own life who've kept you going through those moments of adversity? And did you channel any of them into that dynamic?
The clearest and most obvious are my kids, and in specific, my son Deacon, who is my best friend and who
Mm.
is the light of my life. He's such a spiritual and special dude, and we're just so close. And he really is my favorite person on this planet. I mean, I love all my kids, obviously. It's not a matter of that. It's just him and I have a lot of so much in common. So we love the same music. We have the same sense of humor. We love the same sports teams, all those things. So he comes to mind in that regard. Also seeing, what my parents have overcome in their lives. I grew up, my parents struggled. We don't come from money. They both had very difficult backgrounds. And to see how they persevered, it gives me inspiration. Um, but it's funny you say that too about that the difficulties sometimes in making a movie enhances the final
Hmm.
product. And I remember back when we were doing Flags of Our Fathers, uh, Clint Eastwood decided that we had to shoot on a black sand beach because Iwo Jima has a black sand beach, but you can't shoot there. But Hawaii has one. There's one or two kind of nice places that have black sand beach, but he wanted us to go to Iceland because he wanted us to be in really foreign territory, really out of our element. Because if it was Hawaii, guys would be going, after work to go have a Mai Tai and kick their feet up, and on days off they'd be getting a tan. So that is a key aspect sometimes to making these movies is how and where you make them.
Yeah. Great answer. And like you were saying earlier, there's such a journey that your character and Emil's character go through throughout this film. What was it like getting to collaborate with him and bring that contrast to life?
Well, I just had a suspicion. I had wanted to work with Emil, and I had a suspicion that it would go very well. We had met socially and we had friends in common, but we have very similar approaches to the work. And the characters are so completely different and on
Hmm.
completely different journeys throughout the course of the movie, that it made those moments of conflict very easy in some regards. Um, again, we didn't have a lot of time for rehearsal or a lot of time to explore on camera. We really had to get the meat of what we could as fast as we could, which isn't always ideal. But he and I would spend time working on or rehearsing things in between setups. And yeah, it just flowed. I always enjoyed his work, and I had a suspicion it would go well, and that part of it did.
And you touched upon this earlier as well. And I mean this in the best possible way, but there's a point in the film where your character's lost faith and it's so visceral and written in his body language and demeanor. And as an audience member, you feel that. As an actor, how did you prepare for that point in the film where you see the toll of that loss and how it manifests itself physically and emotionally in your character?
I think that the horrific nature of the situation and what he's seen happen over the course of it up until that point just leaves him numb, leaves him questioning all he thought he knew before, questioning God's motives and God's providence. And I think he has nothing left. You know, he's a doctor, and doctors are meant to save lives. And there's a scene in the movie where my character takes a life, and I think that um, it's so perverse to him, and
Hmm.
also the other loss of life with some of the passengers without giving away too much. I just think the whole situation upends everything he thought he knew and makes him question the very fiber of his being. Um, and at that point, kind of decides to challenge God, or surrenders to whatever might happen. He sits under the tree and says, essentially, if I get eaten by a lion, I get eaten, which is a
Hmm.
crazy place to get to mentally.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what a terrible way to go, man?
Yeah. I mean, credit to you. As an audience member, I felt that. I felt that despair in him and that surrendering, like you were saying earlier. And, Makanda wrote and directed this feature, and you've worked with him in the past. How different is that filming experience when the person who created these characters in universe is also at the helm directing? And how's the trust that you've built previously allowed you to take agency over your character and maybe bring something to Andrew that wasn't initially on the page?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the fact that Makanda is a very interesting dude himself. He
Hmm.
was a monk. He was a monk in India for 7 years. He's an author, a novelist, as well as a writer, director, and film. And we have some of the best conversations, theological, spiritual, metaphysical conversations, all of which are primary areas of interest for me. Um, and he writes in a poetic manner.
Yeah.
Whether or not he gets to fully depict that because of time crunches and you don't have maybe you don't get to do the amount of shots that you'd like to. You don't get to finesse things quite the way that the script is written when you don't have a lot of time, but still the intent there, and there is something soulful about what he does, that I really respond to. And working with writer directors for me is often more rewarding, not always, but often more rewarding than working with just a director who's hired to shoot a script. And you know that it comes from a place within them,
Mm.
um, originally, that these are things that he's was wrestling with or is wrestling with at some point in his life. And so it adds a layer of resonance to the script, to the shoot, certainly.
Yeah, his writing is very poetic. I got one final question for you. You've done it all throughout your career. What is it about independent filmmaking that excites you as a storyteller and a creative?
You know, as difficult as independent film can be from a production standpoint, there is this sense of you're kind of doing it on your own. You really form this small group. You don't have the same kind of suits and the corporate input, that you do with studio films or with those other kinds of productions. So it really gets intimate, and you really are there. You're not getting paid a lot, man. I'm letting a scorpion crawl over my all over my face. I don't know what I ended up taking away from this movie financially, but it wasn't a great deal, but I guess what that belies is a purer intent, maybe,
Yeah.
like, you're doing it for quote unquote the right reasons, I guess, in some sense. Um, and so I think it's that. I think it's that it is very stripped down. It is a struggle, but it's a struggle that requires a bonding and a cooperation and a collaboration from all hands on deck, whether they're in front of the camera or behind. I mean, there's times on these movies this size where I'm carrying equipment and I'm,
Mm.
pitching, somebody gets a cut, I'm going to go get first aid stuff for them. It's like you end up doing things that extend beyond your department on movies like this, which is kind of beautiful.